Well, good morning. It is my great pleasure to introduce this next session, but before we do, I want to conduct a very quick poll, and I'm going to need your help. Can I get everyone, just stand up please, from where you're sitting, just stand up. This will only take 30 seconds. Thank you so much. Now, if you experienced anti-Semitism at university, remain standing. If you didn't experience anti-Semitism at university, please take a seat. So have a look around this room, because we're about to talk about students experiencing anti-Semitism at university today. But as you can see, this is not a new phenomenon. This has been around for some time. I might add, a long time. Thank you. You can take a seat. So students have come to us and they have said, we are experiencing anti-Semitism. So we've gone to universities and we've said, can you please do something about this? And universities have said, what anti-Semitism? We don't have anti-Semitism on our campus, and here's the proof. Students aren't making complaints. And we provide them with anecdotes, and they say, anecdotes aren't evidence, we need hard data. So we now have that hard data. You would have seen this over the last week or so. 2/3 of Australian Jewish university students have experienced anti-Semitism on campus. Half have hidden their Jewish identity on campus in order to avoid anti-Semitism. If you dig into the data a little bit, what you see is that among those students who have experienced anti-Semitism, 2/3 of them will go on to hide their identity in future so as to avoid a repeat occurrence. 1 in 5 students have avoided campus altogether in order to avoid anti-Semitism. Among female students, it rises to 1 in 4. Another statistic, which I don't have on the PowerPoint, speaking of a quarter, is that 25% of Jewish students have been involuntarily excluded or singled out over issues to do with Israel. Now, we didn't ask students, did you have a pro-Palestinian lecturer at university? We didn't ask students, was Israel unfairly criticized on campus? No. We said, did you, as an individual, were you involuntarily singled out or excluded over the actions or perceived actions of a foreign country? And 25% of people said yes. And again, if you dig into the data, this number rises to 30% among those students who are identifiably Jewish through the jewelry that they wear or the clothing that they wear. And it drops to 20% among those students who aren't identifiably Jewish. And so for all of those people who say that their anti-Israel activism has nothing to do with Jews and that anti-Zionism has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, I would say, well, why are you disproportionately singling out Jewish students in the name of Israel? 85% of students did not make a complaint after the most impactful anti-Semitic incident that occurred to them in the last 12 months. 85%. So we said, why didn't they make a complaint? And they said it wouldn't make a difference. They said that the university wouldn't take them seriously. The complaints process was too complex. They were worried that their complaint wouldn't be kept confidential, that their grades would be affected, that they might not be believed. The university said to us that students aren't making a complaint. Well, this is why they're not making a complaint. And these answers should scare the pants of university administrators. So this survey was released about a week ago. It made national headlines. It was on 7:30. It's already been in the Victorian Parliament. It will be in the federal parliament and mentioned in other state parliaments. We have a meeting with the education minister lined up in a couple of weeks. We already have meetings with chancellors and vice-chancellors, either organised or in the pipelines. This survey is going to make a difference, but the magnitude of that difference will depend on what the Jewish community does and what Jewish students do, on what universities do, and what Parliament and government does. And that is why this panel is going to be so interesting. Because we have here today Allegra Spender, who is the independent member for Wentworth. We are currently sitting in the electorate of Wentworth. We are, right? Yeah, cool. Okay. Allegra is the co-convener of the Parliamentary Friends of IRA, that is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and in that role wrote to every single chancellor in Australia urging them to adopt the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism. Now, as an independent member, Allegra, when she speaks to us today of what Parliament should do, of what governments should do, we know that she is not beholden to party loyalty or the strictures of opposition or government. We also have Jillian Segal. She is the president of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, the other representative Jewish group of the Australian Jewish community. Jillian was also the Deputy Chancellor of the University of New South Wales, so not only is she appearing today as a leader of the Jewish community, but as someone who is involved in university administrations, who knows how universities think. And we have Alissa Foster, the President of the Australasian Union of Jewish Students. This survey would not have been successful without the active involvement of AUJS, and in particular Alissa. I cannot praise her highly enough. So with that, I'm going to stop and hand you over to our moderator, Philip. Philip, as you know, was the President of the ZFA. He remains an office bearer. Phil, over to you.
Thank you, Bren. And welcome to our distinguished panellists. It's great to have you here. And I think Bren has put it quite well. There's a problem on campus, and I think we all know that. We knew it before the survey, but the survey has been an excellent way of, I guess, distilling and refining for us the types of issues that Jewish students are facing. And I think each of the three members of the panel are uniquely qualified to focus and give us some ideas, highlight problems for us in relation to different aspects of this very issue. So we've got anti-Semitism on campus. We know it. It's clear now, the survey told us, is that students aren't prepared to make complaints. The IRA definition, I think probably a lot of people in this room would agree, has its elements which are perhaps somewhat controversial for some people, particularly the Israeli component of it. And we've seen that in responses, and perhaps that's part of the resistance we're facing to its adoption. But I'll be interested to hear what you say about that. And universities, for a lot of reasons, perhaps to do with their notions of free speech, academic independence, whatever, and you'll have something to say about this as well, seem not too willing to want to confront this issue head on. So obviously we've got a problem which we need to deal with. We want students to feel comfortable about their Judaism, comfortable about their Zionism, their support for Israel, not to feel that they have to cower or hide their identity. And obviously this is something AUJS faces, head on the front line. But how do we do that? Is IRA the solution? If every campus administration adopted it, would it necessarily make a big difference to this problem? I think we probably need to unpack that a little bit here today and see what everyone thinks. What are other things that could help with this problem of anti-Semitism on campus? Is it a technical issue? If the complaints procedure was different, would Jewish students feel more comfortable? Would it necessarily make a difference if they were able to make complaints? What would the universities handle those complaints in a more effective way? Perhaps do complaints create more problems than they solve by highlighting issues and making students feel more uncomfortable and bringing to the fore perhaps issues which wouldn't have been as prevalent? Are there other aspects? Does AUJS perhaps need to do more, or is it already doing enough in forming alliances with other groups who are also sensitive for their own reasons to discrimination and alienation on campus? And I'm sure Allegra will have a lot to say on this. The money situation. Obviously, the federal government provides a lot of financial support to university administrations. I assume without them they couldn't really function. Is it appropriate for the government, the federal parliament, to weigh in on this in a heavy-handed way, in a more subtle way? How are universities going to react to that? Is it going to, again, perhaps solve more problems than it, create more problems than it solves, or may, in fact, the big stick make a difference? So these are some of the issues I want to canvass with the panel today, and then if we have an opportunity to get your input as well in the room. So perhaps let's start with the survey itself. I'd like, and Alissa, you're on the front line. You can take Jill's mic and see that it works. What was your feeling about the results of the survey? Were you surprised, or did it reinforce what you already knew? And what do you take out of it in terms of your thinking going forward?
Yeah, so is that on?
It's
yeah,
on.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the question, and thanks for having this important conversation. And before I begin, I want to thank specifically Jeremy, Bren, Mai, the whole ZFA team, Jeanette, for working with AUJS to put together this survey. A lot of work has gone into it over the past, I'm going to say 18 months, if not longer, discussing it. And it's really important data that we have, and we're really grateful for their support. In regards to the survey results specifically, I can't say I was shocked by any of the data, because it's what I hear weekly when we're talking about anti-Semitism on campus when I'm talking to Jewish students. Yes, they're experiencing anti-Semitism, but also they don't want to say that they're Jewish on campus, and that the universities aren't doing enough. And the biggest thing which came out for me from the survey, which was that they're not reporting to universities because universities don't understand what anti-Semitism is. And I can look back on the meetings I've had over the past 2 years with universities, and when we say, this is what's happening on campus, this is what Jewish students have told us, the universities say, oh, but we haven't received any complaints of anti-Semitism. And we will raise to them, Jewish students don't want to report to you because they haven't seen you do anything or engage with us. And they go, okay, well, it must not be as serious of a problem as you make it out to be. So what the survey shows us is exactly that we know that there is anti-Semitism on campus, and we know that it is a problem, and we know that universities don't understand what it is. And I'm hoping that the survey data can be used to continue those conversations with the universities to say, look, this is why they're not reporting, this is why the complaints process is not adequate. And on the complaints process, one of the main things we would like to see as a takeout from the survey is the strengthening of the complaints process, but also accountability put back onto the universities. And this isn't just exclusively a problem for Jewish students. It is a problem that's facing students across the country. There was a survey conducted, I think it was last year, with the National Union of Students about sexual assault and sexual harassment on campus. And what that survey also revealed is that university complaint systems are failing. So they're not just failing Jewish students, they're failing all students. And I'm hoping that this can continue and contribute to that conversation, because, again, while the experience of Jewish students is unique in the sense that what we experience on campus is that most people don't know what anti-Semitism looks like, I'm hoping that this can contribute to that conversation as well, that the complaint system is not good enough, there's no accountability for our universities, and students aren't hearing back from the universities about their complaint report and what the outcome of that is. The one other thing I want to mention on the outcome is education, and I'm not sure if we'll get to Ira a bit later, but education is probably the biggest thing that I hope the survey will ignite in other students on campus, not just universities, because we've seen this for at least as long as I've been involved. Jewish students obviously know what anti-Semitism is. We know our story, we know our history, we come from a range of different backgrounds, a range of different experiences. But unfortunately, we are a small community in Australia. Most people on university campuses have never met a Jewish person before. They've never engaged with our community. And what that means is their perception of Judaism and Israel is based on what they've read online, of what they've seen. And it's often a very shallow perception of our community. And as a result of those sort of the comments that are made and the microaggressions that we hear, Jewish students don't want to say that they're Jewish on campus, which also has a negative impact because they're not being publicly Jewish, which means the students around them don't know that they're meeting Jewish people and engaging with our community. So on that one hand, I want other students to see these results and to reach out and to engage with us. And we run and we offer education trainings for student unions and for groups. And to be honest, a lot of them have reached out since seeing this, and the National Union of Students have been working really, really closely with them, and we're very grateful. But as also for Jewish students, I want them to know that they can be proud and should be proud of their identity, because the biggest advocacy tool that we have is Jewish students who feel comfortable and proud to share what Zionism means to them, what Israel means to them, and what Judaism means to them on campus.
Okay, Alissa, thank you. That's a pretty fulsome answer. So I want to take up something with Jill. You've put a lot of emphasis on the complaints procedure. Jill, you've sat on the, from the university side. Do you have as much faith that even if the complaints procedure is improved, students feel more confident, we're actually going to get much joy? I mean, you take the ABC as a comparison. There's a pretty well-established ABC complaints procedure. But as a community, I'm not sure we'd say we're big fans of the results of that process. What's your take on that?
Well, I'd rather compare the complaints procedure or potential complaints procedure at universities in relation to race hatred, anti-Semitism in particular, but race hatred more generally. Let's just talk about that for a moment. to the developing procedures that universities are putting in place in relation to sexual assault than to the ABC. If we could put the ABC aside, we could have another long conversation about the ABC. Because certainly when I was at UNSW as Deputy Chancellor, as Alissa mentioned, there was a complete national survey in relation to sexual assault. And the universities here in Australia took the view, although there'd been a lot of evidence of rape in the United States on campus, that there was no such problem here. And it was complete denial, and indeed the University of New South Wales, where I was, took the lead in doing the survey at that time, anonymous survey around the country with a very high response rate, and the universities were all shocked at the rate of rape. Sexual assault, but let's call it was pretty serious rape. And they had to put in place whole new procedures, not only for reporting rape, but for training staff how to deal with those complaints. And training students, to your point about education, Alissa, training students of a whole new cultural setup of no means no. So it was a whole community cultural exercise. And it's still going. By no means has it succeeded. But it was all the university vice-chancellors getting together and saying, this is completely unacceptable, led, I think, by what they saw in the United States. Because in the United States, having done this 10 years earlier, the federal government said unless the university or the college in the United States does this, they will not get federal accreditation. And the US government passed legislation that said universities had to report on the numbers, be transparent and report publicly on the numbers of rapes.
So Jill, just to interrupt for a sec, do you seriously believe there's a chance that the universities would consider anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, let's use ARA as a framework, to elevate a complaints procedure to the level of sexual assault on campus? I mean, is that any chance of that ever happening?
Well, I think that should be our ambition, okay, in talking to universities. It's not just, and Jeremy and I have gone together to quite a few vice-chancellors, and ECAJ has done some on its own, and I know the ZFA is pursuing other vice-chancellors, and, you know, full credit to some universities for adopting IRA. But as we will discuss, I mean, I think IRA is an important tool, but not sufficient. You can have a definition, but then you need to have a complaints process that deals with the complaints. And IRA's there to provide a bright line, or a relatively bright line, for both students and for university administrators. But you need embedded complaints procedures, and you need training in the administration at universities, and you need education amongst students. So all of that, I think it's an example. We won't go as far. But it is, of course, we are concerned about anti-Semitism, but I think the point was made by you earlier that there are other groups suffering hatred, race hatred, and we probably need to partner with them as well so that we push universities into not only adopting IRA, which is our issue, but also having better processes for dealing with complaints. It's no use just lodging complaints, even if students were comfortable to do so because they felt there was going to be action. There needs to be action. What is the education? What are the consequences for those engaging in race hatred and anti-Semitism in particular? So all that is a big package and a big issue. I mean, universities do say they have their own complaints procedures. They have their own processes. They have their own frameworks, and that's one reason why some universities are resisting adopting IRA. They're also resisting because they have adopted what's called the French Code, nothing to do with France, but just as French, put together a code for freedom of speech that universities were mandated by the previous government to adopt, which they did. And they argue that adopting any other definition gets in the way of free speech, which of course is a nonsense.
Yeah, that's a great segue into a question I want to ask Allegra. So, you know, maybe being a little pessimistic here, but I'm interested in your view. The free speech argument will always be thrown up to a lesser or greater extent. We've seen it in ways which we were very disappointed, like a Jake Lynch at Sydney University, and other examples of where, you know, we considered people who were, you know, behaving in terrible manners were still ultimately protected by the concept of, well, a university is a hothouse of ideas. We shouldn't be too sensitive about what anyone wants to say. Allegra, do you think it's realistic, even if universities adopt IRA, even if complaints procedures improve, that without a very big stick, perhaps, in terms of funding, we'll ever get the majority of universities to say, listen, if someone gets up and says something terrible about Israel, terrible, that, anyone's really going to do much about it on campus?
I think really it's our job to fight for that, I honestly think. And what I would say, I think, that universities, the freedom of universities, the freedom that young people should have in universities to be able to express themselves about their religion, about their, ethnicity, about their sexuality. These are actually fundamental rights in Australian universities, and it's everybody's business. It's not just the Jewish communities, it's everybody's business that everyone feels accepted on campus. And I think it is fundamentally, it is a significant role of the universities to protect students, to enable them to have that experience. So I think we have to hold them accountable to that. I know that the government is actually looking at the university sector at the moment, particularly the governance is one of the areas where the education minister is looking at the start. And I think we've been having some of the conversations about the sexual assault at universities and feeding that into governance. And I think that is the opportunity actually to feed racism and anti-Semitism into this question of, well, what is the responsibility in universities' governance to address these sorts of issues? I fundamentally agree. You're right about the complaint survey, and I think the parallels with the sexual assaults are really worthwhile. But why? And I think it's great that you guys have completed this survey, because I think what would be shocking to most people in the community outside the Jewish community is the extent of this. I did a round table with some young people, sort of at school age, sort of high school age, and recently, and we had some Jewish students and non-Jewish students, and some of the Jewish students told the non-Jewish students about their experience of anti-Semitism, and the others were absolutely shocked. They couldn't believe this happened in their community, and these are all eastern suburbs kids. So, there's a big Jewish community here, but they weren't aware of it. And so I think it's absolutely critical what's been done is to say this is serious, and it's 60, it's almost 2/3 of students who are experiencing this. I think this is the start to actually raise this and say, okay, if students are experiencing this at this rate, is this what we want from our unis? So I think the first step has to be, survey is a great start. I think the Accord is actually an opportunity to go back to the unis, and frankly the survey is an opportunity to go back to the unis, because myself and Jillian, Lisa and Josh Burns have already gone to the unis once. I know you guys have gone to the unis, we're all trying the unis, but I think this is a new opportunity with that survey and with the pending Accord to say, how do we change the governance of universities to take account of the experience of racism and anti-Semitism on their campuses?
Okay, so let me unpack that a little bit. I mean, you're sitting here at the Zionist Federation Conference. So for us, the juxtaposition, and IRA deals with this, but the juxtaposition of criticism of Israel, which it would not be applied to any other country, or treating Israel in some exceptional manner, we consider to be a form of anti-Semitism. Is there a political will, though, at what you see, at your level, what you're involved in, to accept that is a form of anti-Semitism? I mean, you're seeing around the country now banning Nazi symbols, Nazi activity. I don't think we're probably breaking through an open door there. I don't think we're going to have opposition from too many people about that. But is the political problem, and perhaps even from the government's perspective, and the ambassador talked this morning about what the government's been doing lately in terms of Israel, are people just going to say, listen, if Jews are being targeted with anti-Semitic stereotypes or symbols or Nazi activity, no question. Attacking Israel, that's fair game, that's just political free speech. How do you see that issue from a political perspective?
I think broadly in the community it's badly understood, and I would say there would be a lot of people who speak in anti-Israel rhetoric who do not actually understand the history of Israel and the connection with the Jewish community for thousands and thousands of years. You know, I genuinely think there's a big piece of ignorance where people are like, well, you know, the Jews only got Israel, you know, after the Second World War, and they don't understand the sort of indigeneity of the Jewish people to Israel. So I think the history is absolutely critical as a starting point on that. And I think it's harder, it's more complex, but I think it is the conversation that we have to have because of, I think, the connection between the Jewish community and Israel. It's fundamental to anti-Semitism, and so it's complicated, it's hard, but it's what we have to do. And I think, you know, education is really got to be the start of it.
Okay, thank you. Alissa, we talked a bit about cooperation, collaboration with others. You mentioned the National Union of Students. That's gratifying. Over the years, we've had our ups and downs with them, as many in the room could attest. Are you finding other minority groups on campus who you think you can have a natural affiliation with and work together? And what are you seeing in terms of the student councils, the student unions themselves? How is this an issue on the radar? Are you dealing with them? Are you finding opposition?
Yeah, I think it comes back as well to what I mentioned earlier, is that the vast majority of people on campus have never engaged with our community before. And just following on from Allegra's point about IRA, the way we look at anti-Semitism, criticism of Israel on campus, as everyone in this room knows, criticism of Israel is fine. We all criticize Israel when we think Israel's done something wrong. We criticize the Israeli government when we think the Israeli government needs to be criticized. But what we're dealing with on campus is, and the way I look at it and the way I explain to non-Jewish students who don't understand our relationship to Israel and what Zionism means, is that if you're vilifying the associates and supporters of Israel and the Jewish community in a way that you don't vilify the associates and supporters of any other country by, you're probably crossing a line there. And we see that come through in the survey. We see a visibly identifiable Jewish student walking down campus and someone says Free Palestine at them. That's not criticism of Israel. That's singling out a Jewish student. And often when I sit down, or any AUJS leader sits down in a room with the student councils, student union leaders, other cultural groups on campus, and we lay that out, they get it. And unfortunately, the debate gets really politicized and really toxic that it's very difficult to follow if you don't understand our community and where we're coming from. So it's about us getting into that room and being able to explain why we need to be in that room and why this is important to us as Jewish students. And the same goes for sort of the anti-Semitic tropes that often come out, not often, but sometimes come out in sort of conversations around Israel and Palestine on campus. We, as a Jewish community, know the history of the blood libel. We can identify it. But a lot of people who have never engaged with our community have no idea where that comes from and can't identify it. So for us, if there is a picture, this was a couple of years ago, there was a couple of posters plastered on campus that had Bibi Netanyahu, blood all over his face, holding a Palestinian baby, saying Bibi Netanyahu drinks Palestinian blood. It's not about whatever everyone thinks of Bibi Netanyahu, but it's, if you're a Jewish student walking past that hits our whole story and our whole history as a people. So sitting down and explaining that to non-Jewish students and showing where that comes from, what the history of that is so important. And we have seen a lot of student unions over the past 2 years begin to engage more with us on this, recognize that this is a problem, and they've also seen it themselves. What we do as well is we have just launched as of last year, we're in the second year, the AUJS Israel mission, where we take 25 Jewish and non-Jewish students to Israel and Palestine to see the West Bank, to see from up north in Israel to all throughout it. And they're there and they're meeting people and they're seeing the complexities of it. And when you're there, in comparison to what you see on campus, these students come home, and regardless of what they think about the current situation, or regardless of what they think of what they've heard on campus before, once you've seen it and you've been on the ground, when you go back and see the sort of childish student politic-y conversations that happen on campus, you have much more nuance, and you understand that the most important thing that they can do as positions of power, as leaders in positions of power on campus, is amplify the voices of students who are impacted. And we have seen that work already. We saw Australian Young Labour commit to working with Jewish university students and adopt the IRA definition. We've seen a lot of student unions commit to working with us and supporting us and have had conversations with us around the survey. And the National Union of Students in particular have offered us chances to speak at various conferences they hold and understand that this is an issue, but also understand that for change to be made, we have to be in the room to do it.
Okay.
Can I just add a comment?
Yeah, Jill,
there?
I want to ask you something that leads from that.
All right.
Okay.
Well, can I just add that that experience of taking student groups to Israel is exactly what we also need to do with academics, because we have found at the ECAJ that when we've spoken to vice-chancellors in relation to IRA, they might be sympathetic, they understand the story, but vice-chancellors don't make these decisions in isolation. Of course, it needs advocacy from the students, but then they hand it over to groups of senior academics, and there is embedded anti-Semitism amongst many academics. And that is the problem, or a lack of understanding, lack of appreciation, lack of knowledge. So we need to educate the academics in order to move them to help the vice-chancellors, to help the chancellors, to help the students. Now, we have taken a group of academics, senior academics, to Israel on a mission. The first one was, some academics were hesitant, some academics were criticised for going, but nevertheless they went. And again, they had a fabulous experience. They saw both sides of the conflict. They were not in any way constrained about what they saw, who they spoke to, and came back absolutely turned around in terms of their thinking about it and thinking about anti-Semitism, so much so that now we're running a second mission with much more senior academics who previously were hesitant to go, who are now very keen to go. So this exposure to Israel, with all its complexity and of course its cost of taking people, is incredibly important. We need to take more academics, and indeed we have also taken groups of influencers, if I could call them that, people who have large followers on social media. People who are fitness fiends, food fanatics, etc. And they have come back, and we only took a small group as our first trial, and they have reached over 10 million young people. And it's that cultural change that we also need to see, because it's the online social media impact that is influencing so many of the students and the academics on campus. Now, let me just say one more thing about the academics, because some of the criticism about IRA comes from the academics who want to adopt their own definition, the Jerusalem definition. And the Jerusalem definition has no international support in terms of official nation-state support. IRA has adopted it, 34 nation-states and universities right throughout the UK, police academies, etc. The Jerusalem definition is a definition from academics for academics, and it's only that. And that's why some universities say, oh, shouldn't we adopt the Jerusalem definition, because it's those academics I just referred to who are influencing the vice-chancellors and the decision-making, because it's a definition by academics for academics, and what it does and why we must resist it is it specifically recognises what anti-Semitism is not, including BDS, including criticism of Israel, etc. So, Allegra, in addition to promoting IRA, you need to promote non-acceptance of Jerusalem declaration, because it's completely the opposite of flexibility, which is IRA has, constantly adapting to context, and it's academic in its intent and must be resisted, which is why we need to educate academics.
Well, Jill, you actually you've in a sense covered something I was going to say. What disturbed me, I didn't have an instinctive view on this in the survey, was that 29% of incidents involved staff participation, and 70%, according to this survey, involved a staff member who was present but decided to turn their gaze away from the incident. Now, there used to be many years ago in this country, and I don't know if it's still in America, and I think we need to build this. I mean, this work of sending academics is wonderful, but we need, I think, to help build an infrastructure of academics themselves who will be, not Hasbara agents for the State of Israel or the Science Federation of Australia, but who basically, understand the issues, are positive in a general sense, and they will recruit. America had a lot of these, and I think we need to try and help from the ground up build that, because all of us will be limited in how many we can take, our resources, the spread we can have. If they start to build their own organisation and try and recruit academics themselves that we can then work with, I think there'll be a multiplier effect, we've definitely let it go here over the last 20 or 30 years, and there are plenty of academics, I think, who we could work on, and rather than assuming that they're just impossible to deal with. Allegra, let me ask you on the question of sort of the big stick. Let's assume, the university say, thank you very much, we hear you, but we're not going down this track. We don't want to face, staff rebellion and student issues and being accused of not supporting free speech, etc., etc., etc. Do you think there is a will for the federal government at some point, and would you ask them to use a big stick in terms of financial support for the universities if they don't? And if they would, even if they would, do you think that's a bad or a good idea?
Look, I think I come back to, I think the government is right now thinking about governance. And so I come back to that. This is the opportunity to do this, because this is the opportunity to say, well, what does governance mean? And I think the parallels that were drawn with the sexual assaults on campus as well are exactly the pieces, because I think if you're saying that I think you've got the greatest chance of getting the government to act on this if it's a sense of saying, universities have more than just an obligation to teach, they have an obligation to keep people safe, and this is what this is about. And so I was saying, keeping people safe, it's not only the Jewish community, it is, the other communities who experience racism or religious discrimination on campus, and it is also sexual assault. So that's the context I'd put it in, and I think it's great, Alissa, what you're doing in terms of reaching out with other groups, because I think if you can build a coalition around that, then it's saying, then I think you've got the greatest chance of using the government really starting to apply that stick and say, okay, we expect you to take this seriously. And I think just making that the broader context, because I think to say, well, if they don't deal with anti-Semitism, will they use a massive stick? I think the chances of that are much lower than if they don't deal with anti-Semitism, racism, sexual assaults on campus. If they're not keeping the community safe, then I think you actually have a stronger coalition to get the government to take stronger action. So that's how I think about it.
Can I ask you, Alissa, in a sense connected to what Rabbi Hartman dealt with this morning, our own internal perspective, and this always worried me, just the pressure of attacks on Israel and on Jewish people, what it does to our own people. How are you finding, I know the survey talks about students not wanting to identify publicly, perhaps not go to lectures. We're obviously very worried about that. What about student activity? Is it having a corrosive effect on AUJS' activities in all your chapters around the country?
Well, I think it's an interesting time with this question specifically because we are coming out of COVID, which in my opinion has probably caused bigger challenges to the work AUJS does on campus than all the stuff going on right now. But the one thing I will mention on that is that what we are seeing is that people are coming to AUJS because they want a space to be Jewish. We're setting up AUJS, we're the Jewish Student Union, but we're also students, and we care about everything else that everyone else on campus cares about. The current issues that the student unions are talking about, the cost of living, how expensive it is, everything else that's going on campus, AUJS also cares about that, and Jewish students care about that. So especially when there is a lot of toxicity in those spaces on campus already, what we're trying to do is be active in there and make sure that Jewish students know that they can come to us to play a part in that as well. One thing I will mention is what I see as fundamental for our community to be doing in this space is we need to be empowering young people in high school to understand and to unpack what their Jewish identity means to them. I went through a Jewish day school. I've been very involved in the Jewish community my whole life, went on a gap year, went on Shnat. It really wasn't until I came onto campus that I was like, oh, I need to know how to explain why I can't come out on a Friday night. That was never something that I'd been exposed to before. We need to make sure that our young people come to university being able to explain what Zionism is, If they hear someone in their classroom who makes an ignorant microaggression or ignorant comment, because a lot of it is rooted in ignorance, you need to feel comfortable and have the tools to be able to explain, hey, I'm Jewish, this is what my connection to Israel means. Hey, I'm Jewish, this is why that comment's offensive. And those conversations make a massive difference. There's always going to be the malicious group on campus, and we're not, unfortunately, going to get rid of them entirely. But the ignorant group, which is the vast majority of students, we need, as young people, to explain that and to explain what it means to us. So in AUJS, we're trying to facilitate those conversations, but I think those conversations need to be happening in our broader community as well and in our schools.
Yep.
Jill?
Well, I agree entirely. If I can add 3 comments. We need to start in the schools with understanding about racism. And particularly anti-Semitism. And used to be the case when many of the people who didn't stand up earlier, when Bren asked who had experienced anti-Semitism at university, when we went to university and when we went to school, many Jews went to non-Jewish schools. So non-Jews had met Jews. Now we have more children in Jewish day schools. I think there
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. But yes, but the downside of that is many people end up at university and they've never met Jewish students. They haven't engaged with them. So we need to educate many kids at school about racism and about anti-Semitism in particular, which is why we are initiating a schools program of education in relation to anti-Semitism around the country with the support of many different state governments. It's very important.
Holocaust studies are already included?
Yes, Holocaust is a different issue and completely different. And as time unfortunately passes, it's seen more and more as a topic in history. We need to make it real and viable and educate people about racism. And many of the politicians at a state level are very interested in this for exactly the reasons that Allegra articulated. They see it as part of a cohesive society. So that's one. The second thing is that I do think that AUJS, of course, is doing a fabulous job, but there are many, many Jewish students at universities who are scared, and very scared. And when we started a whole series of initiatives in relation to the racism and anti-Semitism that was apparent with the Adelaide Writers' Festival, with 9 Palestinian writers and, of course, no Israeli writers. And we of course, dealt with sponsors and presenters, but also we wanted to have people on the ground demonstrating, holding up signs. We found the Jewish students in Adelaide, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, very nervous about coming out. The Ukrainian community was very strong, but the Jewish community, the Jewish students were nervous because they were unsure of the level of community support. And that is tragic. And thirdly, I just push back on your point about academics, and we can't take them all to Israel. I agree completely. But those that we have taken to Israel have been transformed in their thinking. So I think we really need to take many, many more. Particularly senior ones, and we have vice-chancellors who are prepared to go, etc. And they will influence others. We already had, for example, 1 or 2 academics in Melbourne who've spoken to 25 other academics in their own internal seminars.
No, I agree. I just said I think we need to build organisations among them in the community.
Exactly,
well.
But I think they are doing that, and what we need to do is just ensure that we take more. But they need to be handed responsibility by the university administration for exactly the reasons that Allegra has said, as part of the governance, to ensure that they set up structures to deal with reporting and to deal then with consequence management. It's not only reporting, but then what they do about complaints. And that has been the problem right across the world in relation to sexual assault, what they do about the perpetrators. We need to actually put a complete package of understanding to government of how universities deal with consequence management.
Okay, we're almost out of time. David Knoll had a question. Very quick, David.
Very quick.
Stand up so people can hear you.
No problem.
And then we've got to wrap up.
Various pro bono cases, I have dealt with 3 that involved university complaints procedures. Earlier there was a comment about there were 3. I'll step around to the
Don't outline them all. Just raise the question.
There were three commonalities in three complaints procedure cases with universities, each of which I took on pro bono, and all of which finished unsatisfactorily, but I'll tell you why. The commonalities were this. If it wasn't a sexual assault case, this is post the report dealing with sexual assaults, the university was not prepared to suppress the name of the complainant. Secondly, once there was a report, even in 2 out of the 3 cases, upholding the complaint, once the academics knew, that student was effectively excluded from class discussions and their grades did in fact fall. All 3 students left, each of the 2 universities involved, left the university without graduating.
So your question?
So my question is, if we are going to talk about governance, and this is largely directed to Allegra, it's not at the high principle level. It's who do you appoint, what type of procedural fairness do you impose, and what consequential activity, once the complaint is dealt with, will the university adopt? And those are topics which at the moment, I can tell you, no university is prepared to grapple with because they don't see it as part of governance, they see it as part of administration.
Well, I think we've actually, all 3 have been talking about these very issues. A quick point on this, Allegra?
Look, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's the level of discussion that we need to get to in terms of governance. So, I think, you know, those, I'd love to talk to you afterwards and get the specifics of it, because I think that can actually illustrate what is lacking, because I believe there's political will out there to improve the governance and the satisfaction of, you know, students, but, you know, as always, you know, the devil's in the detail of understanding how does that actually work and play out and what's going on. So I'd love to follow up with that.
I know there are other questions and comments, but I think I'm being told to wind up because lunch at the conference is important. I want to thank Allegra, Alissa and Jill. I think it's been a fabulous conversation. Clearly a lot more work to be done, but I think the survey, I agree with Bren, is a great starting point. And particularly, kol hakavod, Alissa, for what you're doing on the front line. Without it, we'd be in even more trouble. So please, everybody, thank our panelists.